Welcome to Uniting on a Quest for Zero Traffic Deaths, the first installment of our Vision Zero Central Florida Safety Speaker Series. My name is Cynthia Lambert. I am the Public Information Manager at MetroPlan Orlando, and I'll be your host. Here at MetroPlan Orlando, our main mission is to plan the transportation system decades into the future. And our number one priority as we do that is to make sure that it is a safe system. And so we thank you for your interest in safety. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here. And we hope that you'll find inspiration along the way to join us in this quest to make Central Florida's transportation system a lot safer in the future. And so today's program honors World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims, which is commemorated on the third Sunday of November each year. And the goal of this day is to remember those who have died in crashes and to emphasize the need to take decisive action to make our roads safer. So in today's program, we're going to talk about how you can share your story if you have been personally affected by a traffic crash. We'll be talking about Vision Zero Central Florida, which is an initiative to eliminate deaths and serious injuries on the transportation system. And we'll also be discussing the role that local governments all around our region are playing in this initiative. So a couple of housekeeping items before we start. One question we always get is, will the webinar recording be available? The answer is yes. So the webinar recording will be on MetroPlan Orlando's YouTube channel. Everyone who registered for this webinar will be receiving an email in the next couple of days with a link to that recording. So you will have access to that in case you want to go back and revisit any parts of the program. We will also be sharing some links in the chat throughout the program. And we encourage you to share these links wherever you see fit. So whether that's on your social media platforms or with your friends and family, we really want to spread the word about safety. So we encourage you to share. And for those who might be watching this as a recording, we will provide those links in the YouTube video description so that you can grab those there. Also, if you take a look at your Zoom toolbar, you will see a Q&A button. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the program there using that button. We will take audience questions at the end, but you don't have to wait until the end to submit your questions. So please do make generous use of that. So to begin, we want to introduce you to Vision Zero Central Florida. Why should you care about safety? Well, let's listen as some Central Floridians share how they've been affected by traffic crashes and share their thoughts on what they think it would be like to live in a world without traffic deaths.
Well, I have been in Central Florida for 24 years.
I have a lot of friends that have been in accidents, like really bad accidents.
One minute you can be here and the next minute you can be gone.
I was in an accident and the car just flipped out. My mom got injured, the back of her neck. It had a negative effect on us.
Just a train, the train, the car right in front of us and then boom, ow.
Fue un accidente bastante grave. Pasé por 2 cirugías. Aún estoy en muchos tratamientos y actualmente todavía no me he recuperado del todo. Las lesiones que deja un accidente son garrafales.
I had a couple good friends die from a drunk driver. One was like a grandfather to me.
My sister's husband was killed in a car accident, and it affected not only her life, but her children's life, their grandchildren's lives.
My youngest nephew was killed recently, earlier this year, in a bicycle versus pickup truck. It was such a shock to hear of his death. We do love him. We miss him.
Just made me think about my life a little bit more. That could have been me, it could have been anybody.
Okay, people here they're not everybody, but there are enough crazy drivers. They're in a hurry. They don't care. They'll run red lights.
Well, you got to be cautious. You got to have your eyes all around you.
Some of the streets don't have crosswalks or crossing guards, more or less. It's just kids' safety is really my concern in Central Florida.
There's 3 different memorials that I see. It's a young man who was on a skateboard at 6 a.m. that ended up being killed by a car. And almost right across the street from where he died, a 77-year-old man was killed on a bicycle.
And people should be concerned about that.
If there were no more pedestrian accidents or traffic accidents at all, a lot more people will be outside enjoying life.
Where people's not afraid to walk down the street, cross the street, ride their bike.
Be great. Be great.
And people would just be happier, honestly, just going outside, having fun with their families.
Si me imagino el mundo si nadie muriera en un accidente, pues sí, sería muy, muy bueno.
With no accidents, that'd be wonderful.
I imagine the world would be an incredible place because when you see those markers and you think of the folks, what futures they had or could have had, what could have they contributed to our community, to our society, to their families.
And you start thinking about these things and wonder if there could have been something that could have prevented that from happening.
Everybody want to live their life. Everybody want to enjoy freedom. Everybody want to, just live life to the fullest.
So could you identify with some of the folks in the video? We'd love to hear about your experiences. I will launch a poll now so that you can share with us, have you ever been personally affected by a traffic crash? And after you answer the poll, if you feel comfortable sharing some details with us, you can go to your chat box and perhaps type what your experience has been like with traffic crashes in your life. So we'll give you a few moments to answer this. I see that the responses are coming in very quickly, and I'll share those responses after we have closed the poll. So we'll give everybody about 10 more seconds to answer. Okay, so closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. And here are the results. So 76% of our audience members say yes, they have been affected by a traffic crash. And we're thankful for the 24% of you who have not been, and we hope you never will be. But as we move forward, as I mentioned, we dedicate today's program to the 327 Central Floridians who died on our roads last year. This is just an unacceptable number. No one should die while just trying to get around in their daily life. And so World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims urges us to remember those who have died, to support those who have been affected, and really to act to make a change. So we ask you to take just a couple of moments of reflection as you watch this brief videos and think about those 327 Floridians who died on our roads last year here in our 3-county area. So as we saw in our audience poll earlier, many of you have been personally affected by crashes. And we know that each crash is a traumatic experience. So for individuals and for families, they have to endure long-lasting pain and heartache, especially if they have been seriously injured or have lost a loved one in death during a traffic crash. So Vision Zero Central Florida is partnering with a memorial site called drivingdownheartache.org, which you see the URL here on the screen. And this is to honor people whose lives are forever changed by traffic crashes. So Driving Down Heartache is a memorial website that was created by traffic safety advocate Melissa Wandel to create a place of peace and really to show support for those who've been impacted by road tragedy in Florida. So it's a space to congregate, to remember, to heal and support one another, but also to encourage personal accountability for all roadway users. So if you are ready and willing to share your story of loss or survival, we encourage you to visit drivingdownheartache.org and add an entry there. And we will be dropping the link into the chat in just a moment. And so to honor the lives lost, one of the best things that we can do is work hard to make a change. And that's where Vision Zero Central Florida comes in. And so next up, I would like to introduce you to 3 people at Metro Plan Orlando who are working very hard on safety. These are our project managers for Vision Zero Central Florida. And if you're wondering why we have 3, well, you will hear the scope of the project in just a minute and realize why we need 3 folks working on this and focusing on this project. So sharing their expertise today, we have Lara Balk. Lara is a senior transportation engineer at Metro Plan Orlando with 20 years of experience in planning and engineering. And she's managed many projects throughout Florida and has completed many projects aimed at improving safety for all users. Our next speaker is Adriana Rodriguez. Adriana is also a senior transportation engineer at Metro Plan Orlando with extensive experience in managing multimodal projects, including public transportation, traffic studies, and bicyclist and pedestrian safety studies. And finally, last but not least, so Mike Wilson is a senior transportation planner at Metro Plan Orlando with over 30 years of experience in bicyclist and pedestrian safety. And so please remember, you can use the Q&A button throughout the program to type in your questions, and we'll be taking those after our discussion. So let's go ahead and get right into our questions. So for our panelists, we know that transportation safety is a challenge for Central Florida and for many regions across the nation. So as we saw in the opening video, every week here in Central Florida, 5 people die and 35 people are seriously injured on our roads. But we know that the desire to have a safer transportation system isn't new. So how exactly is Vision Zero different from what's been done in the past? And Lara, maybe we can begin with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that safety has always been a priority, as you alluded to, for staff and our board and committees here at Metro Plan and for many agencies throughout Central Florida and throughout the state and beyond, really. But the old way of thinking was that we would sort of focus on preventing collisions. There was a thought that perfect human behavior was required to get to that safe system and that saving lives was expensive. And because of those factors, traffic deaths were inevitable. Well, the Vision Zero approach sort of turns that thinking on its head. It allows for the idea that humans do make mistakes, but that traffic deaths are preventable. There will be crashes, but if we're proactive about creating those safe systems with redundancies in place that are built in to allow for those mistakes, that we can prevent fatal and severe crashes. And I'll leave it there. I know my other panelists have some thoughts.
Yes, well, the emphasis for the Vision Zero initiative shifts the focus from cars to all users of the transportation system, particularly vulnerable users. Vulnerable users are those that are unprotected by an outside shield and have a greater risk of a serious injury in any collision with a vehicle. This includes people walking, biking, or riding a motorcycle. The Vision Zero also incorporates meaningful community engagement, prioritizing those communities most impacted by traffic crashes and that most traditionally underserved by safety efforts.
And I'd like to kind of follow up on what Laura said about perfecting human behavior. But I like to look at it as factors, not fault. Historically, when a crash occurred, we focused on, well, who was at fault? Who made the mistake? And then we try to convince people not to make those mistakes. And that's not to say we're going to start accepting drunk or reckless or distracted driving, but we can make our system more forgiving of normal mistakes, such as when someone misjudges the speed of an approaching vehicle. So if we look at all of the factors that contribute to a crash, we can minimize the consequences of those mistakes.
Great points from all of you. Thank you. So we know that Vision Zero is about eliminating those deaths and serious injuries. So how do we get there? How can we create that safe transportation system? Maybe Adriana, we can start with you.
Yes, well, there are many aspects. One important aspect of creating a safe system is the design of our roadways. Prioritizing safe travel of those vulnerable users over expeditious travel of motor vehicles through the implementation of engineering countermeasures and multimodal street design is essential to improve safety. A good example of prioritizing safety is creating slow zones in areas with high volumes of children, seniors, commercial activity, or pedestrian and bicycle activity.
And to expand on that, speed is really the key underlying factor that affects all the other factors in our safety system. Higher speeds make a crash more likely, and they make the injuries more severe, especially for vulnerable road users. So when we talk about speed, we're talking both about reducing the speeds that our roads are designed for and getting people to adhere to those legal speeds. It's also helpful to think about our traffic system. It's a cooperative system. And so we all have to do our part to make it work. So some of the things we'll be focusing on from a behavior standpoint are, once again, speed, getting motor vehicle drivers to slow down, getting them to yield to pedestrians and crosswalks. For pedestrians, taking extra care when crossing high-speed roads, especially at night. That's where we see the greatest number of fatalities. Similarly, at night, bicyclists using headlights and taillights is critical. Reflectors are simply not adequate for nighttime travel. And even for motorcyclists, in addition to the speed issue, giving yourself more following space so that if you get surprised by something, you've got more time to react.
Those are great points. Two other sort of elements of that safe systems approach that I wanted to talk about are vehicles and post-crash care. When we think about vehicles, there's obviously a role that they have to play in creating a safe system. Vehicle safety features are a part of what drove down the number of fatalities a few decades ago, things like adding seatbelts and airbags and anti-lock brakes. And then more recently, we've seen additional technology-related advances that fortify the role that vehicles can play in avoiding crashes or reducing the severity of crashes, things like blind spot monitors, lane assist technology, collision avoidance systems, or even real-time information, which is something that can get in vehicle for some of the newer vehicles, but it's also available on variable message signs that everyone can see out on our roadways, and now obviously on our devices that we have in our hands all the time. So in addition to that, there's post-crash care, which is another important element in creating that safe system. And the focus on post-crash care is critical for a couple of reasons, not just in order to get to and treat the injured in a timely manner so that we can reduce how severe injuries are and reduce deaths, but also because so many crashes on our roadways are secondary crashes that occur after an initial crash. And so it's important to clear crashes as quickly as possible. So some existing efforts that are in place already to get that post-crash care in place include things like the Road Rangers program, technology that's in place to help staff quickly identify when crashes have happened so they can dispatch emergency responders and then manage traffic after a crash to try and clear the vehicles as quickly as possible and divert traffic if needed so we can get that free flow traffic moving again. So thinking about how we can make improvements to both vehicles and post-crash care will be another key element in moving towards zero deaths and fatal injuries.
Thank you all very much. And for our attendees today. Everything that Adriana, Mike, and Lara just talked about falls under the SAFE system approach. So as you get into this world of Vision Zero, you will hear that phrase a lot. And basically it means that there's not just one thing that we can do to improve safety. We have to do all of those things so that we can eventually get to zero. So let's talk a little bit more about what's going on here locally. What exactly is Vision Zero Central Florida? And Lara, can we kick off with you?
Absolutely. We're really excited about this major effort. It's something that's sort of never been done before. Not only do we have those 3 project managers working on this project, but it's sort of all hands on deck at Metro Plan Orlando. But really all of our local governments are working together to work on safety as a part of this effort. We're not only creating a regional safety action plan that covers all 3 counties within our planning area, Osceola, Orange, and Seminole counties, but we're also developing separate Vision Zero action plans for each county and each city within the planning area. So it's really a big push to cultivate that culture of safety throughout all levels of government. And local staff from every jurisdiction is participating on working groups and sharing their time and their expertise to ensure that the plans are focused on the right projects and policy measures so that we can move the needle. And that includes planning staff, city and county engineers, law enforcement, and beyond. And we're so thankful for their participation in this effort. Before, we've been working on safety, like we've talked about, for a long time, but we've been doing it in more of a piecemeal way. And through the federal government that's funding this effort, it's giving us a chance to think holistically and hopefully fast forward the effectiveness of the work that we're doing.
When we finish up all of these plans, it will make all of our local jurisdictions eligible for additional federal funding that we can then use to build the kind of projects that will improve our safety. So we're trying to get them done in time for that next round of applications. But the outcomes of this plan are about more than just infrastructure improvements and getting people to change their behavior out on the roads, but other safety supporting strategies, such as just setting up routine systems at all levels so that safety is an ongoing conversation for any entity that has an impact on safety. And so when we talk about, say, planning for a safe system, it's not just about how we design our roads, but the developments that surround our roads. So helping the local governments change their policies so that new development has a positive impact on safety. That's one example of the many myriad ways by which we're going to move the needle on safety.
Oh, sorry, Adriana, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Just to add to what Mike alluded, these plans are being developed in consistency with the requirements for the Safe Streets for All grants. As these plans are completed and adopted by local governments, future opportunities for implementation will become available to allow for projects in these plans to be constructed or implemented. We at MetroPlan Orlando will be coordinating with regional partners to identify the best approach to pursue implementation grants in the future, because we don't want these plans to sit on the shelf. We want these plans are actionable plans that identify short-term fixes and strategies where they're most needed, along with long-term programs or projects that will transform the infrastructure in Central Florida.
Great point. We call them action plans for a reason, right? We want them to be put immediately into use. So one key statistic that we saw in our opening video is that 41% of traffic deaths occur on 2% of our roads. And that's really just a staggering number. So one key part of this whole process of creating a Vision Zero action plan is to establish a high injury network. So can you please explain a little bit what exactly is a high injury network, and then how do we select those roads? Mike, can you start?
Sure. So we want to focus on the roads that have the worst problems so that we can have the greatest impact with the least amount of work and expense. And so what we did is we looked at 5 years of all of our crashes. But then we prioritized the crashes that had a fatal or serious injury. And then we also gave some extra weighting to crashes that involved vulnerable users, pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, because they are inherently more likely to suffer a serious injury. So we basically scored all of our road network in that way. And that's where we came up with that 2%. And we can focus on those corridors and figure out what the specific problems are for those corridors, and then what the countermeasures would be to remedy them.
Well, as part of those high injury networks, we have identified both corridors and intersections with high incidence of traffic fatalities and serious injuries. This approach allows for the evaluation of root causes of crashes that can be attributed to specific conditions of certain type of intersections or roadways in our system. Our efforts also include the development of a high injury network at the regional level and a deeper dive into the data to develop high injury networks at the county and city scales. This allows, again, for the identification of local safety needs that could have been overlooked if we only focus at the regional level in terms of developing the high injury network.
Well, Mike and Adriana did a fantastic job of describing what the high injury network is. So I'll just chime in to share when we're going to be making the information available to everyone. So we'll be presenting the high injury network at our MPO board meeting on December 13th. And as usual, that was open to the public and will be streaming on our YouTube channel. And then we're also developing fact sheets for each jurisdiction, which will be available on the project website, which we'll share in a bit. And if you join the mailing list, which you can do through the project website, you can get that information sent to you directly into your inbox.
All right, thank you all very much. So you just described a very data-driven process for these action plans, but we know that a lot of times that crash statistics don't tell the whole story. So how can the public help with these Vision Zero action plans?
Cynthia, you're absolutely right. There are many details that we cannot learn from crash reports. For example, we don't know locations where close call happened, because if a crash doesn't happen, it doesn't get reported. We also don't know of areas that people avoid because they don't feel safe navigating the transportation system. Therefore, public input is a crucial part of this process. It will help us refine the high injury network and understand where we need to focus to have the greatest impact in improving safety in our transportation network.
Great point.
And I alluded to the website earlier, and I see now that Marianne has actually already dropped the website in the chat. It's at visionzerocfl.gov. And if you go to the website, you can click on the link at the top that says help identify safety problems and share your thoughts on where you feel unsafe traveling. At that link, there's a short form that allows you to drop a pin if you'd like and share your thoughts about a specific location or locations. And it even has the functionality where you can add pictures in addition to your text. The form's also available in Spanish and Haitian Creole. And so we encourage everyone to visit the website and to share their experiences with us.
And the information that we're going to receive from you is really of value. It's something we will put to work, and particularly if you're giving us information about those high injury network segments and intersections, because that information then can be combined with the crash data, it can be passed on to the local governments, and that can be integrated into the plans that we make for those corridors. So things that you can tell us about the corridors, such as physical problems that you might see. Let's say there's a bad sight line at a particular intersection, or if you're seeing a consistent form of problematic behavior that people are doing something that's causing a lot of problems that we could either remedy with design or with enforcement. All those things will help us to make the system safer.
Yeah, thank you all. So for any elected officials or local government staff who might be watching today, what advice do you have for them on how they can champion safety within their jurisdictions and communities?
I'll jump on that one first. So the first thing I would say is to just keep in mind that Vision Zero is probably going to require a cultural change within your organization and a change in thinking. And so to not give up if you encounter resistance when you're trying to establish a safety mindset within your organization, and just to keep working at it because it's so important. And then also to be open to changing other policies that may impact how safe our transportation facilities are. This may include things like reviewing policies related to posted speeds or to automated speed enforcement, or it could require reconsidering elements of land development code to reconsider site design requirements that may negatively impact safety for vulnerable road users, things along those lines.
Yes, well, as part of our efforts, we are currently developing an elected officials guide to Vision Zero. This guide will include background information about the Vision Zero initiative and the Vision Zero goals and principles. We will include also key terms and important resources that can facilitate your conversations with the public and becoming a safety champion for your community.
And to bolster what Laura was talking about culture change, one key part of that is what we do with our language, what kind of language we use in describing the problems and the solutions. So one example, you may have noticed that we use the word crash rather than accident. And the reason for that is that accident kind of implies that, well, nobody really was at fault here, and there's really just nothing that could have been done about this. Whereas crash is the more objective and open-ended approach to, all right, something bad happened, and we've got the means to make it a change.
Yeah, great point. So one of the key ideas of Vision Zero is that crashes are preventable, and that's why we're putting all this work in to look at all these different aspects of safety. So we know that, you know, achieving zero traffic deaths is a very ambitious goal, and there will be challenges. So what are some of the major challenges that you see in achieving zero traffic deaths, and how can we overcome those obstacles? Mike, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I'll come back to my favorite thing, which is speed. It's not only that we've designed for speed, but that we have a culture of speed. And so we tend to follow what everyone else is doing around us. So if a handful of people are driving faster, it just makes it that much easier for everyone else to do so. That makes it a really tough challenge, but it's an essential component of making a safe system.
Yeah, one major challenge to achieving zero traffic deaths in Central Florida is evolving beyond the mindset of giving priority to cars. This has dominated transportation and land use policies and practices over the past century. So moving into investing in safe bicycling and walking networks and a strong public transit system is key to achieving our goal of zero traffic deaths and serious injuries in our transportation system.
And I'll add two that I've been hearing at some of the working group meetings that we've already started. The first is distracted driving. I think we all know that this is a major safety issue here in Central Florida and beyond, really. And I think one option for sort of overcoming distracted driving that pops to mind is including educational campaigns for both our current drivers and the next generation of drivers. And then another obstacle that's come up a lot is just the financial costs that it takes to make the many needed improvements here in Central Florida. But the work that we're doing now actually seeks to address this obstacle. As Mike mentioned, these Vision Zero action plans will make all of the jurisdictions that we're working with eligible to pursue safety funding once their plans are adopted. So
thank you very much. And we'll encourage the audience to submit those questions using that Q&A button, because we will be getting to our audience Q&A very shortly. So for our panelists, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share before we get to that audience question and answer session? Just throw it open to if anybody wants. You forgot to say something during the discussion and want to jump in?
Yeah, I like to look at it from the standpoint of, yes, everybody makes mistakes, and that means I'm going to make a mistake. And if I'm going to make a mistake, I want everyone else on the road to be driving, walking, biking defensively to compensate for the mistake that I make. And so if we all have that approach, then we're going to be defensive. You know, if you want other people to be defensive drivers and travelers, then you need to be one yourself. And that will hopefully ripple outward in a positive manner.
That's a good one. So I'll make a pitch for attending some of the outreach that we're doing as a part of this effort. If you go to the project website, vision0cfl.gov, on the Vision Zero resources tab, I believe there is a calendar that's going to show all of the upcoming outreach that we'll be having throughout the region. So I encourage you to attend, or encourage your friends or family to attend, and let us know where they're having experiences and what they'd like to share with regards to safety that we can take into what we're doing.
Yes, I want to add to close that what we are doing matters. Vision Zero is not just a tagline or a program or another plan, but it's rather a fundamental shift in how our communities approach the issue of safety in a roadways and transportation system. To make a real difference, it will take firm commitment to change from us all and come together as a community to work towards this important goal of having a safe transportation system for everyone.
Excellent. Thank you all very much for sharing your expertise with our audience. And so we will ask one more audience poll question. I'll launch that now. You've heard our experts talk about these various Vision Zero principles today. And so please take part in our poll and let us know which aspect of Vision Zero makes you want to take action, what really resonates with you. And we'll give you a few moments. So your answer choices are death and serious injuries are unacceptable, humans are vulnerable and make mistakes, responsibility is shared, death and serious injuries are unacceptable, and humans are, that last one is supposed to be redundancy is crucial. We got a little typo in the poll there, so apologize for that. But we'll give you all about 5 more seconds or so to make your selections. Okay, ending the poll in 3, 2, 1. And so we have 2 definite popular answers, and they're both tied. So the 2 Vision Zero principles that resonate the most with our audience today are that deaths and serious injuries are unacceptable. It looks like we're having a little bit of technical issues with our poll today. So apologize for that one. Let me end that poll. Doesn't want to end now. Gotta love technical issues during a webinar. So we'll go ahead and move into our audience question and answer. We have several questions that have come in from our audience members. So thank you all very much. Let's start with our first question here, submitted by Bob. He says, since speed is a primary factor in traffic fatalities, why not require 10-foot lane widths instead of 12-foot for all road projects in the TIP? And for those who don't know what TIP, that is our Transportation Improvement Program, which is our 5-year plan. So who wants to address kind of how lane widths play into safety, and then kind of what are the guidance that we follow? What are the requirements?
Well, I'll jump in there. Yes, we know that narrow lanes do help in speed reduction, particularly more closer into the urban centers. In the more rural areas, that they can be problematic. But ultimately, the state and county and local governments will be adopting their own standards. We typically don't get into setting standards as a planning agency, for the local governments.
That's correct. Thanks, Mike. Our maintaining agencies, our local agencies, do set their own standards, and often the types of things that they're weighing may include things like emergency vehicles that may need a wider lane to get around, or buses, freight vehicles, that sort of thing. But those are the types of considerations that we'll be thinking about as we move forward in terms of potential policy changes.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. So we have one that was put into the chat. It says, how do you support a safe systems approach when planning for development? And this question applies both to existing and future development. Asking about that land use aspect.
Well, in terms
Go ahead, Adriana.
In terms of land use, it is important to incorporate policies that will improve safety in the roadway system, that will also facilitate multimodal mobility. So, for example, incorporating public transit aspects to new developments, whether providing a space for transit stop that's accessible, that is well connected through safe sidewalks, that is providing the opportunity for people to access transit in a safety manner. Also incorporating aspects of bicycle facilities, and kind of working together with transportation planners that will incorporate those aspects that improve safety, as well as meet the development goals. If Lara wants to add something.
I think you covered most of it. Essentially, what I was going to say, I sort of alluded to this earlier, and there's going to potentially be some recommendations to rethinking what's included in land development codes, where sidewalks are required, but even thinking about things like, what does the cross-section of the roadway look like if we're going to be adding a bike lane? Is there consideration for having it be parking protected so that it's on not next to the vehicles, but on the other side? Those are all sorts of things that we'll be, I think, considering as we think about the safe systems approach holistically.
Two things that I always think about when it comes to new development are, first off, is the nature of the road network. When we have a lot of neighborhood streets that are loops and cul-de-sacs and don't connect, then everyone has to pile out onto our collectors and arterials, which means they're more likely to be 4 lanes or 6 lanes to accommodate that traffic, which means the speeds go up and the risk goes up. So having a better connected system. The other part is how we orient our buildings to the street. When we set our buildings back behind big parking lots, that creates a wide open space feel that encourages people to go fast. Whereas when we put the buildings right up to the sidewalk, then it creates a physical sense of enclosure that discourages people from traveling fast. And those are all handled by the developers and the local governments.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Lenny. A big challenge I've come across is getting everyone on the same page. It seems that everyone wants safer roads, but do not want to be impacted by slower speeds. Very true. We've come across that as well. Basically, people are in favor of traffic calming as long as it's not on roads that they travel. Do you have any material or information that's being prepared to help educate every user to help them understand why traffic calming is so important?
Yes, Cynthia, that is part of our public involvement efforts. Our public outreach is schedule in each of the plans to meet certain milestones throughout the process to educate the community, as not only in terms of what is the issues, what are the issues that we're finding throughout the data analysis process, but also what are some of these countermeasures that will help improve safety, and what are the benefits of those. As part of the scope, we're also having some sessions to train local government staff and elected officials. So we all have the materials, the knowledge, the background to be on the same page, and through those efforts, educate the community about these important countermeasures that will improve safety for all.
I'd like to add that it's not just about reducing the posted speed. Traffic signals are responsible for much more delay than a posted speed reduction would be. So if we can stop having people going 45 miles an hour between signals and then stop and wait for 2 minutes, and instead maybe cruise along at 30 miles an hour, but get all green lights, everybody benefits because we still get there at the same amount of time, but in a much safer manner.
And one thing I'll add is, one thing that we've found is that talking about actual personal experiences, something that happened to a person you've met, really resonates more than just statistics, which is part of why sort of the website that you shared earlier and the presentation is so important, where we can get input from people about what their experiences have been with surviving or losing loved ones to crashes is so important. And so we're really focusing on that, because I think that's some of how we help with changing behaviors.
Thank you. Next question from Karen. When analyzing intersections, how many feet from the intersection do you typically include?
We included any crash that was within 250 feet of that intersection. That was included in the analysis, except for those crashes that were happening in downtown areas where we have short blocks. Then we reduce the intersection influence area for those. So it depends on the context, but it was generally 250 feet from the intersection.
Thank you very much. Next question about social media campaigns from Josie. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. So will we be doing any social media, and are there efforts to collaborate with other organizations like government agencies, private sector, or schools for educational campaigns? And I guess maybe I should be the one to answer this one. The answer is yes. So we are definitely one of the things that we're working on is, you kind of heard the architecture of this Vision Zero Central Florida project, right? We're doing regional level, making sure that we set up, processes so that work can go on at the county level and at the city level as well throughout our 3 county regions. So we are focusing on trying to provide those resources. So we're working really closely with all our local government partners to provide them some communication materials so that they can start sharing those messages. But we're also working really closely with FDOT. This is something that hasn't been mentioned too much today, but FDOT has a campaign called Target Zero, and that's what they call their statewide Vision Zero campaign. So they're working for the same goal, and they have been running in the past year or so a lot of behavioral campaigns on social media throughout the state as well. So here in our area, distracted driving is a big issue. So that is something that they have been focusing on as well. So if you want to look up Target Zero, they have some great resources as well. All righty, we have a question about effectiveness of some bike lanes and paths. So from Elon, what are your thoughts of the effectiveness of having protected bike lanes versus 10-foot multi-purpose bike paths alongside a roadway?
Well, that's something I've done a lot of work on. So one of the key things that we found in some recent research is that cyclists who are riding facing the flow of traffic, and that's irrespective of whether they're in the roadway, on a sidewalk, or on a path, their risk is 5 times greater than if they were going with the flow. So a multi-purpose path on one side of the road means half of the cyclists are going to be going against the flow of traffic. Whereas with any type of bike lane, those are designed for cyclists going with the flow on either side of the road. But when we have a big wide 6-lane highway, people crossing the road to get to the other side to go with the flow might be a bit of a challenge. So, it's really going to depend on the context of the corridor. How many conflict points, how many intersections and driveways there are, what the speed is. Yeah, you can't just take a blanket approach when it comes to bike facilities. And also need to understand that there are some cyclists who would actually fare better in the roadway than would fare on a separated facility because they're faster, particularly with the advent of e-bikes. The speeds that they travel at are really not suitable for separated facilities.
It's a good point that we have to consider not only the roadway context, but also the needs of the users traveling along the roadway. So a question about signage from Carlotta. Besides speed and distractions, I think bad signage in the roads constitute hazardous situations. Can you share, are there any requirements for signage, or whose jurisdiction is that in to kind of decide what type of signage can be on the side of the road?
Well, it depends on who owns the roadway generally. But even before this Vision Zero effort started, there are groups called community traffic safety teams that meet in each county within the planning area. And several of them will go through on a monthly basis and sort of look at fatality or traffic deaths and try and think about what the contributing causes were. And sometimes that has to do with signage, sometimes it has to do with lighting. And so we're going to take sort of the same approach, as I can't remember if it was Adriana or Mike, but we mentioned earlier, this is a data-driven process, but we're going to be looking at not just trends in traffic, the types of crashes, but also sort of deep diving into specific crashes to see what were some of the contributing factors. And in some cases that will be signage, and we'll be making recommendations where appropriate to look at how we can improve that.
The sense that I got from that question was that it was about signage outside the right of way, that it was like business signs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about, if we've got a road that's posted at 45 miles an hour, people are going 50 miles an hour, those signs are sized for someone who's traveling at that speed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the local governments who decide in their building and signage codes what kind of signs can be built and what size and what their appearance is like. But as we hopefully start to bring the speeds down, then we can also bring the size of the signs down and have a little more of a humane environment in that respect.
Okay. Next question is about DUI or DWI citations. So what about alcohol and legal or illegal drugs involved in a crash? How can we use this data to influence car manufacturers to add a breathalyzer type equipment so requiring a breathalyzer to start the car, essentially? Is that something that's in the works? Have we heard of this technology?
Well, automobile manufacturers governed at the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
And we can, and I'm sure the feds have their own data on that. But, it's always a struggle whenever you're trying to get businesses to change what they do, and the buying customer as well. That's something we can certainly lend our voice to. But like I said, it's going to be controlled at the federal level.
Yes. I would like to add that as part of our analysis, we are looking into impaired driving and the impacts to the incidence of high injury of fatalities or severe injuries in our transportation systems. And as part of the safe system approach, we're taking a look at this new technology that is being developed for cars, including some of these, smart technologies that warn drivers when there is a pedestrian or when there is a car, when changing lanes. So we're sure that as vehicle technology is developed, these will be conversations that are going to happen. And this is why we're taking a look at all these factors as part of the safe systems that we can directly influence right now. Car manufacturers, probably it's going to take a long time, but it's part of what we are looking at, and specifically how impaired driving impacts the safety in the transportation system.
If I can chime in, we know that this technology does exist. Many may have already heard about people that are required to put this sort of technology into their cars when they've had a DUI or DWI. I think the question is about making it sort of a standard feature, as Mike alluded to, and Adriana, we can sort of add our voice to the calls for maybe making it a standard feature, but it would be regulated at the federal level.
Thank you. And one last audience question before we wrap up. Can you please share a little more about the role of enforcement and education efforts as part of Vision Zero implementation?
Yes, well, I think Mike alluded to this in one of our discussion points earlier, and it's that Vision Zero is not only about infrastructure improvements. We're looking at different programs, strategies, including education, including law enforcement, that as a holistic approach to improving safety in the transportation system. We understand it is not only about engineering countermeasures. There are behavior factors that need to be addressed, and we are looking at best practices and also based on input from local governments and the community to find those programs and strategies that can effectively be implemented to address the issues we are finding in each of the local jurisdictions we're working with.
Something I usually bring up in the cycling courses that I teach is that the law doesn't tell you what you should do. It tells you what you must do and what you can't do. But there are a lot of things in between. For example, earlier I was telling you about riding your bike on the sidewalk facing traffic. Well, that's perfectly legal, but it's a very much higher risk behavior. And so there's limits as to what enforcement can do. But education, helping people understand the risks and helping them understand what the things they can do to reduce their risk, reduce the likelihood of someone else's mistake becoming a problem for them. It's a challenge, but I think it's an essential component.
Well, thank you very much to all of our panelists and to our attendees who have joined us today. And thanks for the kind words that are coming in from our attendees right now. You have seen, before we wrap up, you've seen this website mentioned many times today. So we just wanted to give you a peek at what it looks like, visionzerocfl.gov. This is the hub of information for our Vision Zero project. So you'll see 3 tabs across the top right now. There's a data dashboard where it's an interactive map. You can explore your particular community of interest. So you can zoom in and look at where crashes have been happening in the past 5 years in your area. The help identify safety problems tabs, our panelists talked about that earlier. That is the form where you can give us your feedback on where you see safety issues in our region. And then under the resources tab, that's where all the other information is. There are a lot of pages there and still a lot more content to be added over the next few months. So we encourage you to please sign up to receive the Constant Contact emails about Vision Zero. You can do that in the resources tab. You'll see the sign up as one of the options there. So as we put up new content on the site, we will be emailing that out to everybody on our mailing list. And so please plan to visit often over the course of the next few months. So our Vision Zero speaker series will resume in early 2024 with a range of topics that are going to go into more in depth into what we talked about today. So right after this webinar ends, a very short 2-question survey will pop up. We encourage you to please give us feedback so that we can improve our future webinars. And again, the recording of this particular webinar will be made available on Metro Plan Orlando's YouTube channel. And for those of you who registered, you'll get an email in the next couple of days with the link to the recording. So we truly appreciate your interest in eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries. We don't want anybody else to die on our roads. And, you know, it really doesn't have to be this way, but it's going to take all of us working together and doing our part to get there. And as you've heard, there's a lot of great work going on with Vision Zero Central Florida across all of our communities in the 3-county region. So we're going to keep working on this until those traffic deaths get to zero. So in the meantime, we hope that you will join us on this quest to achieve zero traffic deaths. Do your part because we can get to zero together. Thank you.